This case started because an officer with the Georgia Department of Revenue went into the Chrisley's property without a warrant, pretended to have a warrant, and seized all their stuff. That sort of government overreach and government misconduct started on day one, has continued throughout the prosecution. There's a number of issues, as I said, in this case that are likely to be reversed on appeal. I think there's two things. I think the very beginning of this case was an unconstitutional search by the Georgia Department of Revenue. This court's already found that was unconstitutional, and it should have stopped the whole case in its tracks. That didn't happen.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
That's certainly one of the things we're pursuing on appeal. The second piece is one of the IRS officers who testified about whether the Chrisleys had paid certain taxes. That certainly, we think, affected the jury, and we believe it'll be a basis for a new trial.
Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. We're going to be talking about Todd and Julie Chrisley. On March 29th, 2023, they filed their appeal. So this is basically them saying, we want a new trial, and this is why. So right now, they are both sitting in federal prison. They were convicted on charges of tax evasion, bank fraud, several charges. Todd, he was sentenced to 12 years. Julie was sentenced to 7 years. Now, I've said from jump, I'm fans of the Chrisleys. I watched them for many years, and I always had an issue really believing that they did this. And I would do my videos, and I would have a lot of people say, I know, me too. But then I would have some people say, oh my God, get over it. Like, they did it. They did this. I will say that if they did it, then I feel like they absolutely should be sitting their butts in prison. But when I watched Emily D. Baker, who is a lawyer, go over this appeal, the documents in their appeal, I was like, hold up. It looks like the judge, the government, and the prosecution all had it out for the Chrisleys.
This is a big problem for me. This remains a big problem for me. This remains a big problem for me.
There were so many things that were done in this trial that should not have been done. And I'm not a lawyer, but I even know that there were things that was done that was so shady in this trial. And when Todd Chrisley's attorney would bring it up and ask for an evidentiary hearing to discuss this with the judge, he would deny the motion for an evidentiary hearing. There was so much done wrong in this trial, okay? So in this appeal, there were a couple of things that they touched on. First off, in the appeal, their CPA, he is claiming that he should not have been tried with the Chrisleys because most of the evidence discussed at the trial was evidence against the Chrisleys. He claims he was just their CPA. He had nothing to do with any crimes. He had no idea that he could possibly have been facilitating bank fraud. He believes that him being tried with the Chrisleys substantially prejudiced his right to a fair trial. He felt like him sitting alongside of them, if the jury felt like they were guilty, they would automatically think that he was guilty. So he feels that his trial should have been separate. Julie Chrisley, she is arguing in this appeal that in regards to the bank fraud, that the government did not provide nearly enough evidence that she had anything to do with this, that she committed any sort of crime, any crime related to bank fraud, wire fraud, anything like that. She is also stating that there were errors in sentencing. So when you are sentenced by a judge in a federal crime like this, they go by like a points system from my understanding. And like for each question you answer, they get a certain amount of points. And at the end of that, you tally up their points. And that's how you give them the certain amount of years. She feels like it was an error in that. She got more years than she should have gotten. He's arguing the same thing that Julie is arguing, that there was not enough evidence that he committed any crimes, that there was errors in the sentencing. You guys, this is a big one. And that by allowing the IRS testimony, Miss Betty Clark's testimony, to stand, to even be brought in, that it was unfair to them because the IRS, now mind you, most of these crimes are they didn't pay their taxes, tax evasion, blah, 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 right? The government relied heavily on Miss Betty Clark, who is the IRS employee. They relied heavily on her testimony. She was one of their key witnesses, her and Mark Braddock, who was the ex-business partner. She gave testimony. They did not file taxes for some years, and other years they filed, but they owed money and that they never paid. That is what she testified to. She sat right there in court, asked by the prosecution, did they file taxes? Not these years. Did they file taxes such and such years and they owe taxes and they didn't pay? Yep. She even said that as recent as the day before her testimony, she went back into the system to double check and that Todd and Julie Chrisley still owed money for taxes. When in reality, you guys, that was not true at all. And as she sat her butt up on that stand, testifying to that, she knew it wasn't true. She knew that Todd and Julie Chrisley had paid their taxes, had filed their taxes, paid their taxes, and not only did they pay their taxes, but they overpaid for some years. And the government, the IRS, owed them a substantial amount of money in refunds.
After the government had obtained its convictions, she contacted the Chrisley's accountant and admitted that the couple did not owe the IRS the money she claimed at trial that they did. Officer Carter told the accountant that the Chrisleys were current on their taxes for 2014, 2015, and 2016, but the IRS had failed to apply the payments to their account. In later emails with the accountant, Officer Carter confirmed that the IRS's system showed that the Chrisleys had made payments for 2014, 15, 16 that exceeded the amounts owed for these years. Yet her testimony left the misimpression that the Chrisleys still owed substantial sums to the IRS, when in fact the IRS had been failing to apply payments that the Chrisleys previously made.
Not only did Miss Betty Clark know that as she testified, but the government, they knew that as well.
Based on Officer Carter's false testimony and the government's failure to correct it, the Chrisleys jointly raised a Giglio claim in their motion for new trial and requested an evidentiary hearing. The government's response admitted, albeit in a footnote, that the prosecution team knew during the trial that Officer Carter's testimony was false and that they did nothing to correct it. Even in the face of these admissions, the district court declined to hold a hearing. It summarily denied the new trial motion in one paragraph of a brief order without stating any reasons.
They actually met with Miss Betty Clark a couple of days before she would testify, and they would tell her to testify this way. As she was on the stand, Todd and Julie Chrisley's defense attorney would get up and say, "You mean to tell me they still owe money for these years?" And she would say, "Yes, absolutely." So they said, "Well, can you let us know how much? Can you, when you go back to work, can you get in touch with us and let us know how much they owe?" And she said, "Absolutely." She did not get in touch with them and let them know how much they owed. As a matter of fact, she waited until after Todd and Julie Chrisley were convicted, and then she got in touch with Todd and Julie Chrisley's accountant, not their lawyer, and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm just getting in touch with you guys to let y'all know that Todd and Julie Chrisley, they don't owe any money." And the accountant's like, "What do you mean? Because you testified that they did." And she's like, "No, I know I testified that, but I was actually told to testify to that. The government, the IRS, had their payments, but just did not apply their payments. But we knew that we had their payments, they just weren't applied." So in Todd's appeal, he's talking about that. He's saying that the jury heard Miss Betty Clark's testimony, and her testimony was false testimony, and the jury relied heavily on that false testimony. They also bring up this improper search warrant that was done on the warehouse. And what happened here, you guys, is none of the evidence found in that search warrant should have been brought into court. Before trial even started, they filed motions to suppress this evidence because the search warrant was not done properly. It was an illegal search warrant. So the judge approved that. The judge did say, "Yep, it was an illegal search warrant. You guys can't bring it in." The defense then filed a motion saying, before they bring in evidence, can they prove that it didn't come from here? Because how are we going to know if it came from the illegal search warrant or not? Can we at least have them show proof of where the evidence is coming? And the judge said, "No, you cannot. Any evidence that they want to bring in, they're going to bring it in. If you guys feel like it came from there, that's an issue that you will raise then." So during the trial, of course, evidence was brought in that came right from that illegal search warrant. And when the Chrisley's attorney tried to raise the issue, he requested an evidentiary hearing saying, "Listen, they're bringing in evidence from the illegal search warrant." So he requested an evidentiary hearing, and the judge denied it. The judge denied his request for an evidentiary hearing to talk about the fact that they were bringing in evidence that should not have been brought in. And according to Todd Chrisley's attorney in this appeal, the fact that they brought in that evidence alone is reason enough for them to get this appeal. So a few things that the government relied heavily on was the testimony of the IRS employee, Miss Betty Clark, who comes back later to say, "Oh yeah, I lied." But in their documents, in the prosecution's documents where they respond to this, They say that it was, she was just mistaken. It was a mistake. She did not lie. It was just a mistake because this was already discussed once, you guys. So when Todd and Julie Chrisley were found guilty, 3 days later was when Miss Betty Clark reached out to their accountant. So when they found that out, when she reached out to them and said, oh yeah, actually they're paid up. They've been paid up. They immediately filed some paperwork for a reconsideration to their conviction. And they said this in that document, in the reconsideration. They filed it before the court saying, listen, Miss Betty Clark just contacted us and said that all of her testimony was false, fake, lies. The judge denied the reconsideration for the conviction, but the prosecution responded to it saying, oh, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Sorry. That alone to me makes no sense. Like if you are, according to Emily D. Baker, even after a conviction, if anybody finds out additional information, it is their duty to bring that before the court. File the proper paperwork and say, this is what we're finding out now, and then handle that. They had a duty to do that, but the judge just kind of pushed it away like it wasn't a big deal. Now, other evidence that they relied heavily on was that of their ex-business partner, Mark Braddock. Mark Braddock, he got immunity for his testimony, and he testified that he helped the Chrisleys commit bank fraud. Now, it was later said that Mark Braddock was like obsessed with Todd Chrisley. He bought their old house. He started dressing like Todd Chrisley. It was also said that he was like a scorned ex-lover, that him and Todd potentially had a relationship. There was someone that testified at the pretrial hearing, another one of Todd Chrisley's ex-employees, who said that Mark approached her and was upset with Todd and said that he wanted to ruin Todd Chrisley and he wanted her help. So she testified at the pretrial hearing to that, from my understanding. Like, hey, listen, Mark Braddock approached me such and such year, upset with Todd, said that he wanted to ruin Todd. For some reason, why does that not matter? Either way, when you really start looking at everything, when you look at the fact that Mark Braddock seemed to be kind of obsessed, buying Todd's old house, dressing like Todd, approaching another employee saying, I want to ruin him, will you help me? And now he is one of the state's biggest witnesses, and he's getting immunity for his testimony. And then you have Miss Betty Clark's testimony. She testifies literally that they owe taxes for years that they did not owe taxes. Not only did they not owe taxes, but they overpaid in their taxes. And like Emily D. Baker said, if they only paid their taxes because they were indicted, so they were indicted back in 2019. If they paid them after that, that could be what the government argued. They could say, well, listen, they're caught up now, but the only reason they paid is because they got busted. They could bring that up. But what they can't do is claim that at the trial that they still owed money when they didn't. That at the trial still claim that they owed taxes for 2014, 15, 16, and 2010. And that's what they did. She sat up there on that stand saying, oh, just yesterday I was checking all the systems, and yeah, they still owe money for this amount of years. Knowing that that was not true. The Chrisleys did everything that they could. They filed motions for evidentiary hearings to bring these issues up before the judge. They filed a motion for a mistrial. They filed everything they could, and the judge literally just waved it off, which is mind-blowing to me. If you guys have a chance, go watch Emily D. Baker. She really breaks everything down, talks about everything in each step of how it happened, and she says, these things are mind-blowing to her. A lot of these things should have never happened. So at this point, you guys, I feel like Emily says this as well. There are often times where people will file for an appeal and it's just kind of BS reasons for why they're filing and they don't get the appeal. But if these are reasons that you want to have for an appeal, it's definitely these reasons. They have solid reasonings for an appeal. Once again, though, it definitely makes me feel like the judge, the prosecution, they were really after the Chrisleys for them to just knowingly get up on the stand, have the IRS employee get up on the stand and commit perjury just because they did not want the jury to know that the Chrisleys had in fact paid all their taxes. Not only did they pay, but they overpaid their taxes. So several things seem fishy here for me, you guys. Go check out Emily D. Baker. I'll link it in the description box below. You guys leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. The fact that Todd and Julie Chrisley are sitting in prison right now while they await for this appeal. I feel like they should be at home. I don't know. I feel like they have really been screwed over. You guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Give this video a huge thumbs up. We're going to continue to follow this case. So if you want to continue to follow it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.